then we further split it 50% for arterials and collectors and 50% for locals.
So you're saying the dollar amounts over the 5-year program, the dollar amounts are going to be the same for each district, regardless of how many arterial miles or local street miles are in a given district?
That's crazy.
Correct. The dollars are the same, the mileage changes. One of the reasons why the mileage changes is because we're doing different treatments. So for example, on an arterial and collector where we're doing fog seal, we get a lot of miles. And then also over the course of a 5-year program, we're doing multiple treatments on a road. So if we milled and filled in the first year, in the 4th year, the program is saying it's time to do a fog seal to maintain that.
So Mr. Letzkus, just to provide an update on what transpired, this was not a recommendation of the Department of Transportation. The subcommittee voted to how to allocate funds, and they voted to allocate funds per district. So that's the scenario that we're reviewing, and we're not reviewing the scenario over the 5 years, but only over the first year of the 5-year period.
Okay, but it seems to me, though, that if, rather than dividing the money up based on 20% for each district, the funds ought to be allocated based on where the roads are needing the repair, which districts have the most traffic volume, which districts have the most roadway miles, and which of those miles are in the most desperate need of repair.
If I may, Albert, that was what I brought up in the subcommittee meeting, that we should do
Wait
it
a
that
minute,
way.
Yolanda, I think you need a microphone. Can someone pass so we can get your comments on the tape?
Thank you. If I may, I was just saying, Albert, that was one of the suggestions that was voted down at the subcommittee, which would have been scenario 5. And we wanted to, I asked that we break down scenario 5 and add with the 50% of locals and 50% of arterials, and just let Street Saver do its thing. That was a suggestion that was brought up, but the subcommittee did vote that down.
So I'll go on to the next slide, and we can certainly come back as the conversation goes along. So with that analysis of scenario 6 and the discussion with the subcommittee, then this is a recommendation that we're making to the Transportation Advisory Committee for your consideration. So distribute the funding equally between the Board of Supervisors districts. Then further distribute 50-50 between arterials and collectors, because we certainly heard that 50-50 between arterials and collectors and locals, because we certainly heard that locals are important. So this is a step in that direction. We would then use the Street Saver software to generate a road list of those allocations using the inputs that we put in. And then the 4th bullet is to allow us to adjust and generate the final road lists through 3 things. Minimizing the mobilization costs by strategic grouping. So what do I mean by that? What I mean is that in a given subdivision, Street Saver may pick half of the roads for treatment in this year and then suggest the other half be treated in a future year. In another subdivision, it may not pick any roads. So what we would do is we would group these roads in the priority that Street Saver gives us to create biddable projects. So instead of a mill and fill here and a mill and fill a mile away, what does year 2 show us? Year 2 shows us, oh, there was another mill and fill here. So can we make these into biddable projects? And that goes to the fragmentation work also, as I was mentioning, along with the subdivision. So those 2 things would be something we'd be looking at to finalize the road list. And as we mentioned early on in presentations, there's a sort of a limitation in the software where when the next project is bigger than the available funds, it leaves those funds unspent. And so we would again look down the Street Saver priority list for where's the next priority project that we could bring in to expend those funds.
Can you also talk,
So, as Madam Chair, Mr. Letzkus.
Yeah, in all the different charts and breakdowns, you have a classification of road called other. What are others?
Thank you for that question. You'll see that sometimes in the footnotes. Others are high volume arterials and collectors. And so this is something that we did to be able to have different kinds of treatment types. If we have a rural arterial, a double chip seal might be an appropriate treatment type. For a high volume urban arterial, it might not be an appropriate treatment type. We'd want to put a micro seal on it. Thinking about some of the different users, the gentleman here who's the gentleman who's been talking about bicyclists, for example. On those high volume urban roads, we might want to have that kind of a treatment. So it was a way for us to differentiate things within the software.
Is that what the UHV stands for? Urban
Yes,
high
urban high
roads?
volume.
Okay.
Yes.
And the miles that you show, are those lane miles or centerline miles?
Centerline miles.
can you also, or maybe someone else, talk to us about the timing, the time frame issue that John had alluded to, the importance of the timing?
That I will turn over to Rob because he has much more experience in putting together the bid packages in a government procurement scenario.
Well, I'm talking about that first project that we were saying. Oh.
Sorry. I want to make sure my breath is fresh. Madam Chair, members of the committee. For biddable projects and for getting things done right away, last year we were tasked with making sure that on basically the beginning of July, we had projects going. To do that, we need to start now, going through our procurement process. So if we have a list of roads now, or if we have an idea of how to generate that list of roads based on the different scenario, the scenario that was chosen or was discussed, and then these other factors, we could generate a list of roads that way and actually get the projects out to bid so that beginning of July, we would have something hitting the streets basically and ready to construct. But the issue, as we had discussed before, was right now there's so many different budget the budget discussions are happening, and there's a lot unknown about how things are going to go and what budget we'll have. We're focusing on the 15 million and also trying to focus more on the locals, roads that wouldn't necessarily be changed with the different budget scenarios that have been discussed at the Board of Supervisors.
Have you concluded your formal presentation?
Madam Chair, there is one more slide.
Okay.
It is another recommendation for your consideration, which is actually something that we heard earlier. And it's about the issue of, with local roads, should we be doing the maximizing of ROI, which means in some cases we would be doing lighter treatments on better roads, or should we just focus on the failed roads for the locals?